Previously, Emily confronted a devastating betrayal. Her sister Vanessa had hidden a secret memo from their father, one that could have changed everything. The tension exploded, and Emily was left questioning her memories, her family, and even herself. In this episode, she hits emotional rock bottom, facing the full impact of what it means to be erased, not just legally, but emotionally. What happens when the people who claim to love you rewrite your story? The document was heavier than paper should be. When I walked into Sylvia's office, the will, my father's real will, was neatly tucked into a red folder. I held it like an offering, or a weapon. Sylvia stood up when she saw me. "Emily," she said, nodding toward the chair across from her. "You're sure about this?" "No, yes. I have to be," I said. She didn't press, just opened the folder and began her work. Filing, drafting, attaching the draft will, Clark's email thread, the voicemail transcript, and the envelope Richard had given me. The packet grew like a file of evidence in a cold case. Except this wasn't cold, not to me. It was burning. As she typed, I stared at a photo frame on her desk. A picture of Sylvia and her daughter on what looked like a graduation day. Smiling, arms tight around each other. No tension in sight. What must it be like to have that? To never wonder if you were loved enough to be remembered in ink. "We'll file a petition to contest the probate judgment," she said, breaking my spiral. "We're requesting an injunction against Vanessa's full access to the estate until the court reviews this version." I nodded. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "No," I admitted, "but I think that's the point." She gave a small, knowing smile. "Good answer." The notice went out that afternoon, sent to Vanessa's counsel, the probate court, and every party who'd received a share under the original will. My phone buzzed 3 times in the span of 10 minutes. Not Vanessa, not Mum, but Callahan. A voicemail. His voice clipped, cold. "Emily, this is extremely unwise. We'll be responding through legal channels." I sat on the edge of my bed and listened again. And again. He sounded rattled, like someone who hadn't planned for me to dig this deep. Like someone who'd assumed I'd go away quietly, just like I always had. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. No one in the family reached out. No one called. No one screamed or texted or asked how I could do this. They just went silent. And somehow that was worse, because silence meant calculation. Silence meant preparation. Vanessa wasn't going to shout. She was going to strategize. And my mother? I didn't know anymore. I couldn't even guess what side she was on, or if she believed sides existed at all. That night, I lay in my old bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the fans spin in lazy circles. It felt like I was 11 again, trying to fall asleep after overhearing Vanessa call me pathetic through the vents. I had cried quietly that night, not because she insulted me, but because I had believed her. Funny how the echoes of old wounds never really fade. They just wait for their cue to resurface. The next morning, I checked my email and froze. Subject line: to be discussed. Family estate dispute filing. From Vanessa Hart-Vart at heartsconsulting.com. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. "Emily," I saw the filing. "You're making a mistake. Not legally, although that too, but personally. I've stayed silent because I assumed grief would soften your judgment. But now you're choosing chaos. You know Dad wasn't well. He was confused. He said contradictory things to all of us. This thing you're doing, it will only end one way. I'm asking you one last time to think about what you're truly fighting for. It isn't money. So what is it?" V. I read it 3 times. The words were civil, even empathetic on the surface, but the blade underneath was sharp. Vanessa had always known how to control a conversation without raising her voice. It was the art of gentle domination. But that last line, "It isn't money." So what is it? I whispered it aloud to myself, and without meaning to, I answered, Proof I mattered. I stepped outside to breathe. The sun was too bright, the sky too blue. It felt insulting, almost, like the world had no idea what I was going through. Or worse, didn't care. I walked aimlessly down the gravel path behind the house, into the trees Dad had planted when we were little. He used to call this the memory grove. Each tree had a plaque. Emily, age 5. First play. Vanessa, age 8. Piano recital. Family. Year of recovery. I stopped at mine. The plaque was rusted, overgrown with weeds, like no one had trimmed it in years. And I realized this was what I was fighting for. Not the tree, not the money, not even the house. It was to not disappear. I didn't want to vanish the way my father's intentions nearly had, the way his real will almost did. The way I had been pushed out, year after year, minute by minute, until I believed I had no place at all. Well, no more. The smear campaign didn't start with a scream. It started with a headline. Daughter contests father's will, claims fraud within family. The article popped up on a local news site 3 days after the filing. My name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't need to be. The accompanying photo, a cropped shot of Vanessa in mourning black, standing beside a framed photo of Dad, made everything clear. There was no mention of the second will. No mention of the documents Clark had. No audio file. Just a smooth, respectful defense of Vanessa's stewardship. A quote from her lawyer calling the filing regrettable, and another from an unnamed family friend calling me estranged and suddenly interested after the inheritance announcement. I felt my breath leave me. I stared at the screen like it was a betrayal in ink, because it was. That night the messages started. Some were subtle. Hope you're okay. Heard some things. Wow. Others were pointed. This is about money, isn't it? Thought you were better than that. And a few were cruel. Don't make a mess while your dad's barely cold. Even the quiet was loud. Friends I thought I could count on didn't reply. Former co-workers unfollowed me. A non-profit I'd volunteered with paused my participation, citing the need for unbiased space. I was radioactive, and I'd barely begun. I called Sylvia in a panic. Should I respond? Should I make a statement? No, she said firmly. Not yet. This is emotional warfare. You don't fight emotion with more emotion. You fight it with facts. Let them waste their fire early. You're holding the matchbook. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I was drowning in mud that looked like water, and every voice, even the ones that once belonged to people who loved me, started sounding like hers, Vanessa's. I tried reaching out to an old friend, Ferte, Madeline, who had been my college roommate and one of the few who met my father before he got sick. I typed and retyped the message for 20 minutes before finally sending it. Hey, weird question. Do you remember Dad talking about estate stuff during your visit? Just trying to piece some things together. Hope you're well. She replied an hour later. Hey Em, I really don't want to get involved in family legal stuff. I remember he was really tired. I don't think he mentioned anything specific. Sorry. Just like that. Another door quietly closed. I didn't blame her, but it hurt all the same. On the 4th day, I heard from Callahan's office. Their reply to our petition had been filed, and it included several scathing implications: that the draft will was an unverified document of dubious origin, that Clark's testimony was outdated hearsay and motivated by long-past loyalties, that I had a history of absence and disinterest in the family's affairs, and the worst, a line that read, "The petitioner has previously benefited from informal financial support from the deceased, unaccounted and undocumented." It took me a second to realize they were referring to the small tuition assistance Dad gave me during grad school. Money Vanessa insisted was just between us. Now it was being twisted into a bribe, a prepaid inheritance. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed again. I took a walk that night. The neighborhood felt the same, but smaller. Like the walls had moved closer without asking permission. I passed Mrs. Langston, who used to bake us cookies every Halloween. She waved, smiled, and then dropped her gaze as soon as she registered who I was. The smile faded. The warmth dimmed. The judgment landed. It didn't matter that I hadn't done anything wrong. It didn't matter that I had proof. In their eyes, I was challenging blood, and blood doesn't get challenged. It gets silenced. When I got home, I opened an old photo album, not to find memories, but to prove I was one. Birthday parties, first days of school, Dad holding me on his shoulders at the lake, Vanessa standing 5 feet away, arms crossed, always perfect, always poised, and me, messy, grinning, reaching. He had loved me, not perfectly, but enough. That had to matter, didn't it? The final blow came from someone I hadn't even considered, my godmother, Sharon. She'd been my mother's best friend since high school. She used to send me little notes in the mail, weird socks, postcards from cities I'd never visit. She called, unprompted. "Emily," she said, voice tight, "I wanted to call you before you heard it from someone else. I've been asked to submit a statement of character on behalf of Vanessa." My mouth went dry. "You're siding with her?" "I'm not siding, honey. I'm trying to help the court understand who's stable, who's been present." "I was present. You were distant. You moved away. You disappeared, sweetheart." "I was pushed out," I whispered. "You can't always be the victim," she said gently. That broke me more than anything, because it meant she believed I wanted to be, that this, all of this, was about attention, not justice, not truth, just noise. And still, through the roar of guilt and confusion, I heard my father's voice in the voicemail. I hope she fights if she has to. So I did. I closed the album, wiped my face, and wrote down every name who had turned away. Not to curse them, but to remind myself, this is what the price of truth looks like. I stared at the name in my contacts for 10 minutes before hitting call. Aunt Lillian. She wasn't really my aunt, just a cousin of my father's, but she'd always felt more like family than most who shared my blood. She used to braid my hair at family reunions. Once she'd slipped me $20 at age 16 and whispered, "For whenever you need to get away from all this." I hadn't seen her in years. She answered on the 4th ring. "Emily?" Her voice was cautious, soft, almost surprised. "Hi, Lillian," I said. I hope this isn't a bad time." A pause. "I know why you're calling." Of course she did. I swallowed. I didn't expect support. I hoped you might remember how things used to be, that maybe you saw things too. "I did," she said quietly. "I saw everything. Your sister, your mother, the way they made you, small." My chest swelled. But I also saw how tired your dad was, and how much cleaner it is now. No fights, no confusion, just quiet. The air left me like a slow leak. "So you're saying I should let it go?" "I'm saying," she sighed, "I'm too old to pick sides, and I don't want to be dragged into this. Not again. Not again." "I tried to stand up once," she whispered. "Years ago. It didn't end well. I lost your father for a decade." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. We talked for 2 more minutes, about the weather, about nothing, and then I hung up. Another door gently closed, another bridge burned by fear disguised as neutrality. That afternoon I pulled out a journal, not the one from my father, mine. I started writing. Every flashback I could remember, every instance of favoritism, every subtle dismissal, every moment I'd swallowed myself just to avoid becoming the problem daughter. It was a strange sort of archaeology, unearthing my own erasure. There was the time Vanessa got a new car for her graduation, and I got a gift card. The time Dad came to my recital, but left halfway through to catch Vanessa's awards dinner. The time Mum said, "You know she's just more focused than you. It's not favoritism, it's responsibility." I didn't write to prove anything to them. I wrote to prove it to me, that the pain had a source, that it wasn't invented, that I wasn't crazy. I visited Mr. Murphy the next day. He'd worked with my dad for years, through 3 companies, 2 startups, and more all-nighters than anyone could count. He was the one person I hoped might break the silence, say something, stand up. His house smelled like coffee and dust. He welcomed me in with a tight smile. "You look like hell," he said gently. "Thanks," I replied. We sat in his study, surrounded by boxes of my dad's old project files. "I remember when he talked about changing the will," Mr. Murphy said after a while. "He was torn. Vanessa was always pushy, always organized, but he worried she'd twist things, said you had the heart, she had the mind." "Did he ever tell you why he didn't finalize it?" Mr. Murphy hesitated. He said he was tired, said every time he tried to shift things, someone made him feel like he was betraying a balance. I looked at him. "Was it my mother?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Emily, I believe you, but belief doesn't win cases, and it sure as hell doesn't fix families. I'm not trying to fix anything anymore," I said. "I'm trying to be seen." He rubbed his temples. "I can't testify. I'm sorry. I just can't." "Because of your job? Because of what it'll cost?" I stood slowly. It hurt, but I understood. And maybe that was the hardest part, understanding why no one would fight for me. They were tired, afraid, self-protecting. But I was tired too, and I was still fighting. That night I sat in my father's office again. It still smelled faintly like his aftershave, like memory. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the small cassette player I'd found weeks ago, the one with a handful of old family recordings. Most were silly. Road trip songs, Vanessa reciting math facts, me trying to whistle. But the last one was different. It was labeled only July 3rd, late. I pressed play. His voice was quiet, raspy, measured. "Emily, if you're hearing this, I didn't get to say it, but I wanted to. I'm proud of you. You never tried to be anyone else, even when I made you feel like you had to. I hope you forgive me, and I hope you never let them make you small again." I broke. Completely. There in the dark, I let it rip through me. The grief, the validation, the heartbreak that came with hearing what I needed too late to change the outcome. He had seen me, just not soon enough. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. I came by the house to pick up a box of old paperwork Sylvia had asked for. My birth certificate, school records, anything that could help counter the narrative that I was absent. My mother had agreed to leave them on the porch, but they weren't there. I stood at the door, heart pounding, hand halfway to knocking. The curtain shifted. She opened the door before I could touch it. "I thought you said you'd leave the box out," I said. "I changed my mind," she replied, and then, almost like it was choreographed, she stepped aside. "You want it?" she said. "Come in." I hesitated, but I walked in. The house smelled like lemon polish and guilt, the same scent as always. The living room hadn't changed, same floral couch, same dusty photos on the wall, same place I used to sit and pray, literally pray, that I'd be noticed the way Vanessa was. The box sat on the coffee table. I moved toward it. "I heard from Aunt Lillian," she said suddenly. I stopped. "She said you've been calling people, asking them to take your side." "I'm asking for the truth," I said. "I'm not asking anyone to lie for me." She gave a soft, tired sigh. "You always thought truth and loyalty were the same thing." I turned to face her. "No, you always confused loyalty with silence." Her expression flickered. "You could have stopped this," I continued. "You could have said, 'This isn't right. Emily deserves her part, her name, her voice.' But you didn't. You watched it happen." "I held this family together," she snapped suddenly, louder than I'd heard her speak in years. "Through affairs and debt and disease and 2 daughters who wanted nothing to do with each other. I wanted everything to do with you," I shouted. "With him, With us. I just didn't want to have to disappear to be accepted. Silence. Tight. Electric. Then she sat down. For a second I thought she might apologize, but instead she said the thing that shattered me. You were always going to leave. We just adjusted before you did. The words hit like stone. You pushed me out and then blamed me for leaving, I said, voice cracking. You were a storm, Emily, and we needed stillness. I stared at her. I didn't know whether I wanted to scream or crumble. Instead, I walked over to the box. I opened it. Papers, files, a few childhood drawings Dad had saved. The ones Vanessa once called scribbles. And then underneath it all, a sealed envelope. It had my name on it. My breath caught. I looked at her. She said nothing. I took it and left. I didn't open it until I got back to the guest room where I'd been staying. My hands were shaking. Inside, one sheet of paper, my father's handwriting. Emily, if you're reading this, it means you're still fighting. I don't know what they told you. I don't know how the end looked from your side, but I want you to know. I tried. I tried to include you. I tried to name you. I tried to explain. I never stopped loving you, even when you didn't call, even when you stayed away. They needed Vanessa to be the face, but you were always the soul. Don't let them erase that. Dad. I pressed the paper to my chest and sobbed like I was 7 years old again. Not because I was sad, but because it wasn't too late. Not yet. I still had my name, my truth, and no matter what they took from me, they couldn't take that. But the collapse came the next morning. I arrived at Sylvia's office, letter in hand. She looked pale, tense. Her assistant gave me a tight, worried smile and avoided eye contact. What's going on? I asked. Sylvia closed the door behind me. They filed a countersuit, she said. Vanessa, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, damages. I blinked. What? She's claiming you've made false and malicious statements, that your public questioning of the will has caused reputational harm and emotional damage. They're demanding a retraction and public apology, or they'll escalate. My knees went weak. I sank into the chair. She's trying to make me stop. Sylvia nodded. Yes, she wants to bleed you out. Financially, emotionally. She's escalating because she knows the next hearing is going to expose the documents, and she'd rather destroy me than be revealed. Yes, I laughed, sharp and humorless. God, of course she would. That night, I broke. Truly broke. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just curled up in the corner of the room with my father's letter, the cassette player beside me, and the awful echoing feeling that no matter how much I screamed the truth, no one wanted to hear it, because no one wants the ugly story. They want the clean version, the daughter who went away, the one who came back angry, the one who tried to take what wasn't hers. But what if I never left? What if I was pushed, erased, rewritten? What if the story they're telling isn't true? Then again, if no one believes it, does the truth even matter? That was the moment I hit rock bottom. Not when I was lied about, not when I was betrayed, but when I started doubting whether I existed the way I remembered myself. That's what family betrayal does. It doesn't kill you, it erases you. One line at a time. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up. It was still dark. My face was pressed against the hardwood floor. The cassette player had stopped. The tape stretched to the end, the quiet hiss of nothingness filling the silence. I sat up slowly. My body ached. My mouth was dry. There was a moment, no longer than a heartbeat, where I forgot everything. No lawsuit, no sister, no mother who called me a storm, just air. Then it all rushed back like floodwater. The envelope, the letter, the defamation claim, the isolation. I stood and walked to the bathroom, flicked on the light. The reflection startled me. I didn't look like me. Eyes swollen, hair tangled, a cut on my lip I didn't remember getting. I leaned in, stared hard. Who are you? I whispered, because honestly, I didn't know anymore. Not the good daughter, not the estranged one, not the quiet one, not the troublemaker, just someone in between, someone trying to claw her way back into a family that had never truly made room for her. And suddenly, in a strange, twisted moment of clarity, I realized something. I wasn't fighting for the inheritance. I wasn't even fighting for justice anymore. I was fighting for identity, for permission to say, yes, I was there. I mattered. My version of the story counts. I had spent so long trying to be seen through their eyes. I'd forgotten to ask if I even wanted their gaze. I lifted my arm and, in a single unthinking act, swung it into the mirror. The glass cracked with a sound that seemed to echo through my ribcage. Spiderwebs of shattered reflection danced across the surface. I stared at the fractured image of myself. 5 versions of me, none of them whole. And yet, somehow, all of them honest. Later that day, I sat in Sylvia's office again. "Can we settle?" I asked quietly. She blinked. "Do you want to?" "No," I said, "but I want to know what I'm fighting for, not what they're trying to steal." We talked about strategy, about outcomes, about the limits of courtrooms and the deeper wounds they never heal. Then she asked me, "What do you want, Emily? What would feel like enough?" And I answered without thinking. Recognition, a line, a sentence, something that says, "He saw me. He meant for me to be there." She nodded. "Then we keep going." 2 days later, I got a text from Clark. It was a screenshot, a copy of a forwarded email chain from my father's old account to Callahan, dated 6 weeks before his death. In it, my father had written, "My final decision is Emily gets the lake property. Vanessa keeps the main house. I want it split. She deserves her part." One line, not notarized, not legally binding, but one line. I stared at it like scripture, not because I wanted the lake house, but because it meant. He tried, even if they buried the words, even if they pretended otherwise. He tried, and that was the first moment I let myself believe this was never about winning. It was about not letting them erase him, not letting them rewrite him as a man who chose silence, because maybe he hadn't. Maybe he was erased too, by them, by fear, by illness. And maybe I wasn't the storm. Maybe I was the aftershock. I didn't call Vanessa, didn't message Mom, didn't reply to the lawyer's threats. I just sat in the silence of my own knowing, and for the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid of it, because silence didn't mean shame anymore. It meant power. It meant presence. It meant, I'm still here. Even after the collapse, even after the war, even when there's nothing left to inherit but truth. Last time we watched Emily fall apart, isolated, humiliated, and unsure of what was even real anymore. But in the quiet aftermath of that storm, something unexpected begins to stir. In episode 4, Emily starts to rebuild, not just her case, but her voice. A hidden letter, a new ally, and a reclaimed space at the lake house begin to light a path forward. This is the turning point, not of the legal battle, but of the woman within it. The day after I shattered the mirror, the silence was louder than the glass had been. There were no more calls from lawyers, no angry emails from Vanessa, no stiff-voiced updates from Sylvia. There was just air. And for the first time in weeks, I let it in. I opened the windows of the guest room. I washed the blood from my knuckles. I stripped the bed and started the laundry. Not because I felt strong, but because I needed the rhythm of something that didn't involve survival. Folding towels was easier than folding grief. I drove to the lake house that afternoon. I hadn't been back since I was 15. Dad used to take me every summer, just the two of us, back before everything got complicated, before Vanessa started managing the family calendar, before Mom began claiming she just couldn't handle rustic places. It was the one space that ever felt like it belonged to me. The driveway was overgrown. The steps creaked. There was a family of squirrels living in the eaves, but it was still here, still waiting. I walked inside and breathed in the smell of cedar, mildew, and memory, and I wept. Not from rage, not even from sadness, but from the simple relief of being somewhere that hadn't tried to erase me. I spent 3 days there. No phone, no emails. Just me, a notebook, and a kettle that took forever to boil. I made a small fire each night and wrote longhand. Not about the case, not about the betrayal, but about her. Me. The version of myself that had been slowly suffocating under all the labels they'd handed me. Difficult, dramatic, too emotional, absent, ungrateful. I listed them all. Then I drew a line through each one. On the next page I wrote, "If my daughter ever asks who I was when I was 35, I want to tell her the truth. I was a woman who was learning how to stay present, stay honest, stay alive, even when they tried to disappear her." On the second night, I dreamed of Dad. We were sitting on the porch. He handed me a cup of coffee and said, "You're stronger than I was." I shook my head. He smiled. "That's why they're scared of you." I woke up crying, and for once I didn't apologize for it. I found the box on the third day. It was under the floorboard of the old closet, the one Dad had told me never to play in because of mice. But there were no mice, just a locked metal tin. The key was taped to the bottom. Inside were 3 things. A black notebook, his handwriting, dense and looping. A photo of me at age 7, holding a fish bigger than my torso, grinning like I'd won a war. A small cassette tape labeled "Just in Case." I held them like artifacts from a forgotten civilization, and maybe they were. Dad's notebook wasn't a diary. It was more like a record of conversations, decisions, hesitations. There were notes about the will, about Vanessa, about me. "Emily thinks I don't see her. She's wrong. I see her too clearly, and I know what this world does to women like her. Sensitive, unafraid to challenge. It grinds them down or calls them names. I want to protect her, but I also want to let her rise." I pressed my forehead to the cover and whispered, "I'm rising, Dad. I am." That evening, I drove back into town. There were new emails, missed calls, legal updates, but I didn't read them right away. Instead, I took a walk. Past the houses of people who had once judged me. Past the stores where I used to shrink myself. Past the bench near the school where I once kissed a boy who told me I was too much. And I sat down, and I existed. Not loudly, not vengefully, just fully. Sylvia called the next morning. "You okay?" she asked, surprised to hear my voice. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." She exhaled. I didn't expect that. Neither did I. I told her about the notebook, the tape, the lake house. I didn't tell her about the mirror. Some things were just for me. That night, I wrote a new entry in my journal. "I don't know how this ends. I don't know if they'll ever admit what they did. But I do know this. I will no longer beg to be believed. The truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to breathe." I didn't expect her name to light up my phone. Madeline, the friend who had quietly disappeared after the inheritance mess made the news. The one who'd once held my hair back after a brutal breakup. The one who'd ghosted me when I needed character witnesses. Her message was short. "Hey, Em, I've been thinking about you. Can I call?" I stared at it for almost 5 minutes. Then I replied, "Yes." Her voice came through soft, hesitant, but not cold. "Hi." "Hi," I breathed. "I know I owe you an apology," she said. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say the wrong thing." "You didn't say anything," I said gently. "I know." Silence. Then she added, "I read the blog." My heart caught. "You knew it was me?" "I knew your voice. You write like you talk when no one's watching." That wrecked me in the best way. "Madeline, I thought I'd lost you." You didn't, she said. I just hid. But I've been watching, listening, and I need you to know something. I braced myself. You were always the real one, she said. Back in school, with your messy notebooks and your loud heart. Everyone looked at Vanessa and saw polished perfection. But you felt things that scared people. It still does. I closed my eyes. There it was again, the thing no court could rule on, but I ached for anyway. Witnessing, truth, recognition. I miss you, I whispered. I miss you too, she said. We met for coffee the next morning. She looked the same, hair always falling into her face, chipped green nail polish, and that unmistakable scent of vanilla and stress. We talked for 2 hours, about grief, about cowardice, about how sometimes the people who love us most get it most wrong. Then, as we stood to leave, she said, You know your dad told me once that you were the reason he still wrote. I blinked. What? Yeah. We were sitting by the fire after dinner. You'd gone to bed. He said, Vanessa handles things. Emily feels them. She's the one who'll carry the story when I'm gone. My throat tightened. I thought you should know that, she said, before you ever need to prove anything to anyone else again. That night I pulled out my laptop. Not to draft legal statements, not to sort evidence, but to write. Not about Dad, not about the lawsuit, but about me. I wrote about the first time I realized I'd been made invisible. I wrote about the way grief makes you question every memory. I wrote about forgiveness, not as surrender, but as a way of saying, I won't let this own me anymore. When I was done, I didn't post it publicly. I printed it, stapled it, and slid it into the envelope with Dad's letter. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, only that it mattered, and that was enough. The next afternoon, I went back to the lake house. I spent hours in the attic, sorting through boxes. At the bottom of one, beneath a pile of faded receipts and tax folders, I found something that didn't belong. A small navy blue envelope with a wax seal. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting. It was addressed to me. The date was 7 months before his death. M. If I don't get to say this in person, let this stand. You are not lost. You are not crazy. You are not imagining the imbalance. I let too much go. I was tired. I chose peace over fairness, and you paid for that. I'm sorry. You were never the storm. You were the truth. Dad. I sat on the dusty floor and held the paper like a lifeline. Not because it would win a court case, but because it was a record, a confirmation, a father finally seeing his daughter clearly. That night, I uploaded a new blog post, this time under my real name. Title, The Daughter They Forgot. I didn't name names, didn't mention lawsuits. I just told the story of being the quiet one, the emotional one, the one who wasn't believed, until she learned to believe herself. I went to bed with my heart racing, not from fear, but from release. By morning, the post had 4,000 shares, hundreds of comments, messages from strangers who said, I thought I was alone. A woman wrote, Your words put language to pain I never dared speak. Another, My mother erased me too, but I'm still here. And one from a man named Jared. I worked in legal admin for Callahan briefly. I remember your father's case. There were things that never made it into the file. I might be able to help. I stared at the screen. For the first time in months, I smiled, because the cracks were opening, and through them, light was getting in. His name was Jared Stone, mid-30s, polite, concise. I only worked at Callahan and Price for 6 months, he wrote, but your father's estate file crossed my desk during onboarding. I remember it because something about it felt edited. He didn't write more in the first message, didn't make any promises, didn't hint at whistleblowing, just left a door cracked open. And I, after months of pounding on walls, stepped through it carefully. I messaged back. We agreed to meet in a neutral public space, an old coffee shop just off Main that smelled like scorched espresso and varnished wood. Jared arrived exactly on time, holding a beat-up folder under his arm and looking as nervous as I felt. "I can't talk long," he said as we sat. "Still have colleagues at the firm, but when I read your post, I couldn't stay quiet." He slid the folder across the table. I opened it and found a scanned memo, handwritten, initialed, from my father. It was addressed to Callahan for final update. The note read, "Remove the previous clause about the lake house going solely to Vanessa. I want this split. Emily is to receive full title. Confirm timeline for signature. JH." My stomach flipped. Date, 3 weeks before his stroke. I looked at Jared. "Was this filed?" He shook his head. "No, I flagged it for inclusion. The next day the file was gone. I asked a partner about it. He told me not to touch it again." "Did you, keep a copy?" "I saved the scan. Didn't feel right to just delete it. Guess I had a feeling." "Why are you giving this to me now?" He looked at me for a long moment. "Because it was yours. And they took it." Back at Sylvia's office, I dropped the folder on her desk like a bomb. She flipped through the pages, scanning quickly. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. This changes everything," she said. This was suppressed, illegally. You can use it, we can file it, and if it's confirmed to be authentic, it's proof of will manipulation, maybe even fraud." She paused. "But you need to be ready. This is a weapon, and they will treat it as such." "I'm ready." I wasn't sure if I was lying, but I said it anyway. That night I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the memo. My father's handwriting, his initials, his final correction of a wrong. I thought about how many times I'd doubted myself. How many nights I'd convinced myself the story I remembered wasn't real. This piece of paper said otherwise, but more than that, it whispered, "You're not crazy. They made you think you were." And that truth cracked something open inside me, not just anger, not even grief, but a quiet, molten power, like lava under skin, the kind of power that says, "You buried me, and I still came back." In the days that followed, Sylvia moved quickly. We filed a petition to reopen the estate with new evidence. We submitted the scanned memo with a notarized affidavit from Jared. We attached character testimony from Madeline, and for the first time since my father died, Vanessa called me. Not through her lawyer, not through threats, but directly. Her voice was flat, clipped. "You think you've won?" "No," I said calmly. "I think I've been right. There's a difference. You're tearing this family apart. You tore it the moment you erased me from it." She didn't respond. Then quieter. "You were always jealous." I laughed, because the old version of me, the girl craving her sister's approval, would have wept at that. Now I saw it for what it was. Her fear that I had stopped needing her validation. "You can keep thinking that," I said, "but here's the thing, Vanessa. This isn't about you anymore." I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about it. I went back to the lake house a few days later. This time, I brought paint. White, soft grey, a little blue for the shutters. I didn't know what I was building. I just knew I was reclaiming something, not just a house, a narrative, a place in the world I didn't have to fight for anymore. I painted for hours, window by window, board by board. With every stroke, I thought, "You were wrong about me. You were all wrong, and I forgive you anyway." Later that week, I received an email from Jared. Subject, another piece. Attached was a photograph. A yellow sticky note, scanned from an old project file. In my father's handwriting, "Give Emily the porch swing. She needs a place to breathe." I stared at it until tears blurred the screen, because of course, he'd remembered the swing. Of all things, the one place I used to sit as a kid and watch storms roll in. He knew. He always knew, even if he never said it out loud. Even if he didn't know how to fight for me against their noise. He saw me. That was the real inheritance. The morning I published the piece, my hands didn't shake. Not like before. This time there was no anonymity, no pseudonym, no masking my pain in clever metaphors or blurry timelines. The title was simple: Let Me Tell You Who I Am, Since They Won't. I opened with memory. A small one. Me at 13 holding a birthday card from Dad that said, "You ask too many questions, but never stop asking them." Then I told the truth. The real truth. Not the legal timeline. Not the dispute over deeds or signatures, but the one that had lived in my bones for years. The ache of being the daughter who wasn't protected. The girl who learned early that silence was safer than being called dramatic. The adult woman who returned home not to make trouble, but to make peace with a ghost no one else wanted to admit existed. I wrote, "They say I came back angry, but I didn't. I came back hoping they'd say, 'We remember you, we missed you, we know what he meant to you.' But they didn't, so I stopped asking, and started writing." The post went live at 7:03 a.m. By noon it had gone viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of messages, people writing to say, "Same." People saying, "You gave me permission." People saying, "You're not alone." I wasn't ready for how much that would matter, or how little Vanessa's silence would mean in the face of so much resonance. That evening, I sent the link to her, and to my mother. No message, just the story, not to accuse them, not even to guilt them, just to say, "Here I am, whether or not you look." 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, from my mother. 5 pages. No greeting. No, "Dear Emily," just straight into it. "I read what you wrote. I can't say it didn't hurt, but I won't say it wasn't true either." I held my breath. "You always wanted more from us than we knew how to give. You always felt deeper, reacted stronger. Your father saw that and tried to protect it. I didn't. I didn't understand you, and I didn't try to. I'm sorry. Not for the money, but for making you feel like you had to fight to exist." That was all. There was no signature, no call to reconcile, no neat bow. But it felt like the first honest thing she'd said to me in 20 years. I folded the letter and placed it next to Dad's last note. Together, they formed a strange kind of mosaic, a fractured family portrait built not of memories, but admissions. It was enough, not for restoration, but for recognition. That night, I did something wild. I applied to teach, a local writing workshop, hosted by a nonprofit for women who had survived emotional abuse and family estrangement. They needed someone to lead a class called Finding Your Voice. I didn't know if I was qualified, but I knew what it meant to lose it, and what it took to take it back. A week later, I stood in front of 12 women in a church basement with bad lighting and folding chairs and the smell of old carpet. I said, "I don't have all the answers, but I know how to write when you're shaking. I know what it's like when telling the truth feels more dangerous than lying, and I know what it's like when nobody believes you, until they do." A woman in the front row wept silently through the whole session. She hugged me at the end and whispered, "My daughter needs you to keep talking." I told her, "Mine does too, even if I don't have her yet." The next day, I received a message from my cousin Evan. We hadn't spoken in years. "I read your piece. I never knew half of what happened, but I remember something. Your dad once said, 'If Emily ever gives up, it means I failed her. Just thought you should hear that.' And that was the moment I realized it wasn't about reclaiming property anymore. It was about reclaiming the story, and through it, reclaiming me." The hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. on a grey Tuesday. I wore navy blue, not black. I wasn't mourning anymore. Sylvia met me at the courthouse steps. "You don't have to speak today," she reminded me. "It's procedural, just a motion to admit new evidence." "I know," I said. "But I'm not here to win. I'm here to stand." Inside, the courtroom was colder than I remembered. I took my seat on the left side, behind Sylvia. Vanessa sat across from us, with her lawyer, a man who looked like he had never once cried in public. Vanessa didn't glance at me. Not once. But my mother was there too. And she did. She looked older than I remembered, thinner. Her jaw clenched tight with a kind of stoicism that used to scare me. But when our eyes met, she didn't look away. She just nodded. A small, almost imperceptible movement. And somehow, that meant more than any apology she could have spoken. The hearing was brief. Sylvia presented the scanned memo, the sworn affidavit, and Jared's testimony. Opposing counsel objected. Inadmissible hearsay, questionable origin, irrelevant to the final probate outcome. The judge listened quietly, took notes. Then he said, "I will allow the motion. We'll set a date for review." And that was it. No victory music, no dramatic declarations. But still, I breathed easier. Because it meant the truth got entered into the record. Even if the system didn't reward it, it acknowledged it. Sometimes, that's the only win you need. Afterward, I didn't talk to Vanessa. I didn't wait for her to approach me. Instead, I walked out onto the courthouse steps, felt the sun on my face, and whispered, "I made it." Sylvia joined me a moment later. "You're incredibly brave," she said. I shook my head. "I'm just done being erased." She smiled. Same thing. That night, I went home and unpacked a box I hadn't touched in months. Inside were old family photos. Dad holding me as a baby. Vanessa blowing out candles at age 5. A blurry shot of the lake, fog curling over the water like breath. I pinned one photo to the fridge. The one of me at 10 years old, standing in front of the porch swing, arms crossed, hair wild, grinning like I knew a secret. Because maybe I did. Maybe I knew that someday I'd come back. And maybe I'd lose almost everything in the process. But I'd gain something they could never take. Myself. The next morning, I returned to the lake house. This time with a box of wind chimes. I hung them on the porch, the same place Dad once drank his coffee while I read books with my feet tucked under his legs. They sang in the breeze like bells of absolution. I sat in the porch swing and opened my journal, wrote one final entry for the week. I thought justice meant making them say I was right. But now I know, justice is when I no longer need them to. I carry the truth in my chest now, and that's where it will stay. Not for them, not even for court, but for the girl I used to be, the one no one listened to. I hear you now. I believe you. I've got you. And for the first time in what felt like years, I rested. Not in retreat, but in reclamation. In the last episode, Emily took her power back. Slowly, quietly, and on her own terms. She stood in the courtroom not to beg for justice, but to affirm her truth. Now, in our final episode, it's time for closure. The court will make its ruling. But more importantly, Emily will make her choice. Win or lose, the woman who once questioned her worth is about to show us what it truly means to live your own legacy. I didn't flinch when Sylvia told me the date. "Final hearing is set for Monday morning," she said, eyes steady. "They'll review everything, your testimony, Jared's affidavit, the handwritten notes. This is it." I nodded calmly. But inside, I felt it. The quiet thunder, not panic, not dread, just inevitability, like the moment before a storm that doesn't terrify you anymore because you know how to survive wet. "I don't know if I want to speak," I said. "I think I've said everything already." Sylvia looked at me for a long moment. "You have, but the court hasn't heard it." I knew what she meant. They'd seen the paperwork, the timelines, the transactions, but not me. Not the daughter who used to sit on her father's lap with cracker crumbs in her hair and questions in her chest. Not the woman who walked into a funeral and left erased. So that night I began to write, not a legal statement, but a letter. Not to the court, not to Vanessa, but to him. Dad. "Dear Dad, this isn't a eulogy. I've written too many of those already. Some for you, some for the girl I used to be. This is a reckoning. You once told me I was too emotional. I wore that like a curse for years, but now I see. It was never a flaw. It was the thing that kept me breathing. I don't know why you didn't fight harder. Maybe you thought silence was love. Maybe you hoped we'd work it out. But silence is its own kind of violence, and Vanessa's voice was always louder than mine. I'm not here to punish her. I'm just here to be heard. Finally, fully, and maybe, Dad, to forgive you. Not because you earned it, but because I want to walk away without chains. I folded the letter and slipped it into my journal. Didn't know if I'd read it out loud. But I needed to write it. Words are funny that way. Sometimes you have to get them out just to remember who you are. The next morning, I stood in the guest room of the lake house and pulled down an old sweater Dad once gave me. It still smelled faintly of firewood and cheap cologne. I put it on over my blouse. Not for luck, but for armor. The courtroom didn't scare me anymore, but memories still did. On the drive there, Sylvia kept stealing glances at me. "You're quiet," she said. "I've said all I needed to say." She smiled faintly. "Then say it again," for the girl who wasn't believed. That nearly broke me, but I held the pieces together, because this time I was showing up as a whole woman, even if I'd had to glue myself back with truth. When we arrived, Vanessa was already inside, wearing grey, no makeup, hands clasped tight in her lap, like a statue praying to no god in particular. I didn't hate her anymore. That surprised me. I just didn't need her to be anything for me anymore. Not kind, not cruel, just irrelevant. My mother wasn't there. That didn't surprise me at all. Some stories are too heavy for those who helped write them. The judge entered at 9:02. The air tightened. Sylvia stood first, summarizing our case, not with drama, but with clarity. She presented Jared's documents, played the voicemail of Dad, read the line from his journal. Emily is the one who sees. Then she looked at me. My cue. I rose slowly, walked to the stand. The judge didn't ask me to swear in. I already had. On every page, every tear, every post I'd shared under my name. So I just spoke. "I'm not here to reclaim an object," I said. "I'm here to reclaim my name." My voice didn't shake. It carried. I was not estranged. I was removed, and then rewritten. I paused. "I don't want your sympathy. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor of erasure." I unfolded the letter I'd written, and I read it, every word. Even the parts that made Vanessa's face stiffen, even the parts that made the clerk lower her eyes, because that's what survival sometimes sounds like, uncomfortable honesty spoken calmly. When I finished, the room was silent. Not a victorious silence, a real one, like breath being held. Then the judge said, "We'll reconvene in 1 week for a ruling." I stepped down, walked past Vanessa without looking, walked into sunlight with my jaw relaxed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to win. I just needed to be real. And I was. The waiting was harder than the courtroom. There's something uniquely hollow about the space between "we'll see" and "this is the outcome." It's like being suspended mid-air, after the jump, before the landing. I spent that week in silence. No posts, no texts, just the lake, my journal, and the slow echo of everything I had already said. But on Friday evening, I received a message that shook loose the stillness, from Vanessa. "Can we talk before Monday?" I stared at the screen, no emotion, no punctuation, just that. I could have ignored her, should have maybe, but I typed back, "Come to the house, Sunday, noon." She arrived late. Of course, in black leggings and a cream sweater, with her hair in that same impossible bun she wore to Dad's funeral. She didn't knock, just stood by the porch railing, looking out over the lake like she still owned the view. "You wanted to talk?" I asked, stepping outside. She turned slowly. "I wanted to say, I didn't ask for this to go this far." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you?" She flinched. Not like this. There was a pause. Wind brushing over the water like an exhale. You were always good at telling stories, she said. And you were always good at erasing them, I replied. She looked away, then back. I thought Dad was trying to punish me when he wrote that clause. I blinked. You mean the one giving me the house? She nodded. I didn't understand it. I thought he was undoing everything we built, so I took it back. You stole it back. I protected what I thought was mine. I stepped closer. No, I said. You protected a version of the story where you were always the center. And I was the footnote you didn't want to acknowledge. Silence. She opened her mouth, maybe to deny it. Then she closed it again. For once, Vanessa had no comeback. Only a truth too loud to refute. I didn't know how to love you, she said finally. You were too much, too sensitive, too close to him. I nodded slowly. And you were too cold for me, too careful, too afraid to let me matter. We stared at each other. Sisters, strangers, scars shaped like silence between us. I'm not here to make peace, I said. I didn't ask for that. Good, because peace was never yours to grant. I made it myself, and I turned to walk inside. But before I closed the door, I said, if you ever want to read who I am, there's a copy of my book in the mailbox. That's the version you never let yourself know. She didn't answer, didn't even turn around. But for the first time in years, she didn't stop me from walking away. That night I slept deeply. No nightmares, no late-night pacing, no conversations I needed to rehearse anymore. Just stillness. On Monday morning, we returned to court. Same judge, same courtroom, different woman. This time, I sat not as someone trying to prove anything, but as someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to live for. The judge reviewed the new evidence out loud, then delivered the ruling. This court finds the evidence submitted, including the handwritten memorandum, to be credible. Therefore, Emily Hart is granted legal ownership of the lake property. All remaining asset disputes are considered settled. Case closed. Just like that. No applause, no catharsis, just a line drawn in ink. And yet, I felt it. Not victory, not even relief, but weightlessness. I didn't look at Vanessa. I didn't need to, because it wasn't about her anymore. This win was quiet, but it belonged to me. Entirely. Outside the courthouse, Sylvia hugged me. I'll send you the title documents this week, she said. I believe you, I whispered. She smiled. I always did. And she left. No fanfare. Just another person who helped me stitch the torn edges of my life into something whole. I stood on the steps for a while. Phone off. No witnesses. Just me. And the sound of my breath in a world that, finally, made room for it. I didn't go out to celebrate. No champagne. No dramatic toasts. Just a slow, silent return to the lake house. The house that now, finally, legally, undeniably, was mine. I stood at the edge of the porch with the keys still in my hand, and for a long time I didn't move. Not because I didn't want to go inside, but because I was realizing something. This wasn't just a house. It was a graveyard of memories, and a birthplace for the ones I still had to make. The next morning I received an email. Subject line, he mentioned you often. It was from a woman named Janice, a former colleague of Dad's from the university, where he had guest lectured once a semester. She'd read my blog, then the article that had been circulating. Someone had written about my story. The sister, the inheritance, the voice that wouldn't stay buried. She wrote, your father always spoke about you, not with pity or concern, but with a kind of reverence. He said, Emily is the one who feels what I'm too scared to say out loud. I still have a few of his old notes, and something he left in a folder marked 4M. If you want it, it's yours. I drove 3 hours to meet her. She was in her 70s. Warm smile, hands like tissue paper, voice like a lullaby dipped in smoke. She didn't ask about the lawsuit, didn't mention Vanessa or the drama, just handed me a box. "Some of it might not make sense," she said, "but I think he meant for you to figure it out." Inside were half-filled notebooks, ink-stained index cards, old lecture outlines with the margins filled in with musings like, "Why do we only eulogize men when they're gone? What if we told the truth while they were still living?" Emily, the most honest audience I've ever had. God, I hope she forgives me someday. And at the bottom, a small black digital recorder. Battery nearly dead. I pressed play. A crackle of static. Then his voice. Low, hoarse, vulnerable in a way I had never heard when he was alive. You asked me once why I didn't stop Vanessa from taking more than her share. I didn't have the courage to say it then, but here it is. I was scared that if I stood up to her, I'd lose both of you. I chose the coward's peace. I thought I had time to make it right. I ran out. You didn't need to be the loudest to be the strongest. You always were. I hope someday you'll see that this, all of it, was never because you were less. It was because you were more. And I didn't know how to protect that. I sat in her study and cried. Not like I had before, in anger, in grief, in betrayal, but in release, like something had been pried out of my chest and finally placed down. That night I lit a candle on the lake's edge. No ritual, no photos, just me, the wind, and the sound of water lapping against the rocks. I whispered, "I heard you." And the silence that followed felt like an answer. Over the next few weeks, I began compiling the letters, recordings, and journal fragments into one document. Working title, Letters He Never Mailed. But the truth, it was just as much about me as it was about him. I wrote in the foreword, "This isn't a love letter. It's not a story of redemption. It's a record of what's said, what's left unsaid, and what we carry when they're gone. If you've ever felt invisible, maybe this will help you find your shape again." The first publisher I sent it to passed. Too personal, they said. Too raw. I laughed, because if too raw is the only thing they see, then they never read the story at all. So I self-published, 100 copies, printed on thick paper with soft covers that felt like old skin, and I gave the first copy to a young woman in my workshop named Cassie, who once told me, "My mom said I was too dramatic to be believed." So I started writing things down, just in case one day I had to prove I wasn't lying. I told her, "This book is proof that being too much is exactly enough." She held it to her chest like it was oxygen, and I realized this was the legacy. Not the property, not the verdict, but the stories passed hand to hand, heart to heart, echoes that refused to be silenced. I thought closure would feel like a finish line. Instead, it felt like a doorway, one I could step through, but only if I was willing to leave certain things behind. Sylvia called a few days after the book launch. "There's still one unresolved item," she said. "Technically, you have grounds to sue for damages. Emotional, financial, reputational. The suppression of the memo alone is textbook legal malpractice." I listened quietly, let her speak, then asked, "What's the cost?" She paused. "They'll fight it hard. It'll get ugly. You'd win, but it won't feel clean." I already knew the answer. "I don't want what I wasn't meant to carry," I said. "I wanted them to say I existed. They didn't, but I said it loud enough for both of us." Sylvia didn't argue. "I'll close the file," she said. That same afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. From Vanessa. Typed. Cold. "I assume you're satisfied now. I won't be attending any more proceedings. I'm leaving the state. Don't contact me." No apology, no reflection. Just distance wrapped in legal politeness. Still, I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer, because not every goodbye needs a ceremony. Some endings are just endings, and that's okay. A few days later, I was sitting on the dock when I saw a shadow approaching through the trees. It was my mother. No call, no warning. Just there. She stopped a few feet away, holding a small tin box in her hands. "Your father kept this under the floorboards of the closet," she said. I stood, took it gently. Inside were old photographs of me and him, of the lake, of a sunset we both said looked like fire over water, and a note in her handwriting. "He loved you in ways he never knew how to show. I didn't make it easier, but I see it now, and I see you. I hope that counts for something." She didn't ask to come in, didn't linger, just nodded, and left. And that moment, unscripted, unforced, was the closest thing to healing we'd ever shared. The next morning, I went to the town office and filed 2 documents: a deed transfer to place the lake house fully in my name, a permit application to convert the side cabin into a writing retreat space. I named the project The Second Voice. It wasn't just mine anymore. It was for every woman who had ever been rewritten by her family and decided to write herself back in. That night, I found myself on the porch swing again. No storm this time, just stars, and a quiet that didn't ache. I thought about all the versions of myself I had carried to get here. The girl who stayed silent so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. The woman who begged for proof that her pain was real. The sister who thought maybe, just maybe, she could be loved if she kept shrinking. They were gone now. Still part of me maybe, but no longer steering the ship. I was captain now, and my compass was truth. The lake woke up before I did. Mist hovering above the water, like breath held between sentences. The porch creaked under my weight as I stepped out with a mug of tea. Barefoot, heart strangely still. This was my morning now. No court dates, no waiting for phone calls that never came, no calculating how to be enough. Just breath and birdsong, and that quiet holy ache of beginning again. The writing workshop filled up faster than I expected. 12 women, all different ages, backgrounds, wounds, but every single one had a story someone once told them was too much. The first session, we didn't write. We sat, introduced ourselves, only by first names, shared one thing we'd never told our families. Some cried, some laughed in that sharp, brittle way that hides years. And when they looked at me like I might have the answers, I said, "I don't, but I know what it's like to survive being misunderstood, and I know the power of writing a sentence that doesn't apologize for existing." One woman, Cassie, told me, "This is the first place I haven't felt crazy." I told her, "That makes 2 of us." The book, Letters He Never Mailed, sold 50 copies in the first month, then 100. Then a podcast asked me to speak. Then a memoir agent called. But none of that mattered as much as the letter I found on my doormat one foggy morning, written in purple ink with slightly crooked handwriting. "I'm 12. My aunt read your book to me. My mom doesn't believe me when I say stuff. But now I believe me. So thank you." I taped it to the fridge, right next to the photo of me and Dad on the dock, the one where I was missing a front tooth and he was pretending to steal my sandwich. That girl had come home, and she brought her voice with her. A year passed. I painted the inside of the lake house, bought second-hand lamps, laughed with neighbors I never knew existed, adopted a dog named Clove, who barked at shadows but slept at my feet like she knew my pulse better than I did, and every so often I'd catch myself in the mirror, not searching for flaws, but checking in. "Are you still here?" I'd whisper. And the answer each time was yes. Yes. And finally, one fall afternoon, I hosted a storytelling night on the porch. String lights, blankets, cider in chipped mugs. Cassie read a letter to her future self. Another woman read a poem called Inherited Silence. I didn't read anything, but I listened. And when it was over, one of them asked, "How did you know it was over? The pain, the need to prove it?" I smiled. It's not over, I said. It's just not in charge anymore. Later that night, I sat alone in the porch swing, watching the moon skim the surface of the lake. I reached for my journal, wrote one final entry. Dear Emily, you were never too much. You were just waiting to take up the space that was already yours. I'm proud of you. I'm here for you. And we're not done yet. But we're finally free. I closed the journal, leaned back, listened to the wind chimes sing over the water, and whispered. This was never about the will. It was about finally learning to live mine.